Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. I remember when I was first collecting baseball cards, I would tell my dad either, hey, this particular card is worth X, or hey, my entire baseball collection is worth, whatever number it was at the time. And my dad would say, well, it's really only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. Now, of course, I'm not claiming that my dad originated that phrase, but 40 years later, we still hear that. Someone will ask, hey, what is my card worth? And invariably, someone will say, well, it's only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And in a sense, that is correct, but it is missing one other component. Now, for my job, I make small business loans, and most of those loans involve the purchase or construction of a commercial building. And during my underwriting of a loan to see if it's something that we're willing to make a loan for, I take a look at the value of the collateral that is supporting that loan. And in the case of commercial real estate, the value of that collateral is based upon an appraisal. And I happened to be looking at an appraisal the other day on a potential loan request, and I came across this section that is in pretty much every single commercial real estate appraisal, and it has to do with the definition of market value. So I wanted to go over what that definition is and tie that to sports cards, because as soon as I read that paragraph, I immediately thought of sports cards and what a sports card is worth. So here's the definition. Market value means the most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale, the buyer and seller each acting prudently and knowledgeably, and assuming the price is not affected by undue stimulus. Implicit in this definition are the consummation of a sale as of a specified date and the passing of title from buyer or from seller to buyer under conditions whereby buyer and seller are typically motivated, and 2, both parties are well informed or well advised and acting in what they consider their own best interest. So what this means is that, yes, it's true to say, hey, this particular card is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it, but as a seller, you also have to agree to what that seller or that potential buyer is willing to pay for the card. So you need a buyer and a seller agreeing to a specific price for that card to say it has a value of X. Now, we see it every day on eBay. There are thousands of cards that sell, which means that there is a willing buyer but also a willing seller to meet upon an agreed price. Now, this could take various means. A seller could put a card up at a buy it now price. And there could be someone that sees the listing and says, hey, that is a fair price. I'm willing to pay that. And a transaction takes place. Both parties agree to that price. And for that particular card, that now becomes the value of that card for that single transaction. A seller could put a buy it now or best offer, and a potential buyer of that card could make an offer, and the seller takes a look at the offer, and if they agree to that offer price, again, a transaction takes place, and that agreed upon price is the value of that particular card. And if a seller puts a card up for auction, they're basically saying, all right, whoever wants to put in offers, whoever has the highest offer, I am willing to agree to that. And whatever price that auction ends at, assuming there are bids, That's the value of that particular card. But what happens when a seller has an unreasonable price? We've seen it all the time on eBay, social media. They'll post some outrageous listing where someone has an incredibly high buy it now or best offer, or even an extremely high opening bid on an auction. And we laugh and shrug it off of saying, oh my gosh, they don't know what they're talking about. There's no way that card is worth whatever they're asking for it. And in those cases, or a lot of cases, you can say, all right, well, let's look at comps. Well, the last sale of that particular card, where there was a willing buyer and seller, let's just say went for $100. And the card before that, there was a willing buyer and seller, and let's say it went for $105. And the card before that had a willing buyer and seller of $95. So you had $100, $105, and $95. Well, you could say, all right, well, my card is worth $100. You take the average of the last three, and you can say my particular card is worth $100. Well, not really. Now, the previous sale at $100, that was the agreed upon price for that particular card. The one before that was $105, and the one before that was $95. So for those three particular cards, those were the values of those cards. Now, if I put my card up and I say it's $100, all right, so I'm going to put a buy it now for $100 because the average of the last three sales were $100. But let's say there's no willing buyer at $100. Maybe the $95 was the last sale. And although the last three averaged $100, maybe people are looking at that and saying, well, maybe the price is going down a little bit and I don't want to pay $100. I want to pay $95. So the listing just stays out there. So for my particular card, now that may be an extreme example of looking at just a $5 difference, but if I list my card for $100 and people only want to pay $95 for it, it doesn't sell. So is my card worth $100? No, because there is not a willing buyer of that card. And as a seller, I'm not willing to sell it for $95 because I said I want $100 for it. Now, for most cards, there ends up being a willing buyer and seller. But you get an instance of maybe a very rare card, whether it's serial numbered or just rare. There, you very well could get a buyer and seller that do not agree on a price. Maybe the seller thinks, hey, this card's so rare, maybe there's no comps, but maybe they're looking at other players' cards that are similar, and so on. Or maybe they think, okay, well, the last one sold 3 years ago, and knowing where card prices are now, I think it's valued at X. Well, again, if there is not a agreement between a potential buyer and me as a seller, there's no transaction. So what really is that card worth? And it also pertains to vintage cards, especially graded vintage cards, because as we know, not every, say, PSA 5 vintage card has the same eye appeal. So again, going back to my example, let's say I have a vintage card PSA 5, and I look at the last sale, and let's say it was $200. Well, I want to sell my copy. So I say, okay, well, the last one sold for $200. So I'm going to put it at buy it now for $200. Well, my card may not have the same eye appeal in a PSA 5 as the last one that sold. So sometimes eye appeal plays a factor in vintage baseball cards. So again, does that mean my card is worth $200? It may be worth $175 because while mine has the same grade, maybe mine's more off center, but maybe sharper corners, and the other one was really nicely centered, maybe a little bit issue with corners, and someone wanted to pay a premium for that card. So again, you can't necessarily look at comps. I know a lot of, especially with the modern cards, it's all about the comps. Well, what's the latest comps? And that's what I think this one should go for. Again, you have to remember that those comps were for those particular cards at that particular time where a buyer and seller agreed upon a price. So that doesn't necessarily mean your copy that you want to sell is going to sell for the same price as, say, the last several that sold. So again, it was something that I thought of as I was looking at that commercial real estate appraisal and realizing that the phrase, well, a card's only worth what someone is willing to pay for it, isn't the complete picture. So would love to know your thoughts on what the value of a particular sports card is in your collection or someone else's collection. With that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.